Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. As you guys know, sometimes I do lens reviews and things that I'm interested in, or sometimes they're given to me and I think like this would be an interesting value proposition. And lately I've been on the pursuit of the $1,000 kit. I'll talk more about that in a future video. But one thing that kind of plays into it is cheap lenses that would be interesting to work with. And typically, cheap lenses end up being just manual focus glass. But I was recently contacted by 7Artisans to, like many other YouTubers, test out this 7Artisans 50mm f1.8 lens, and this one is for the Nikon Z mount. I got this lens the other day and I've been playing with it for the last 2 weeks, say a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I have some interesting thoughts about it. I'm going to do this review kind of off the cuff because I know what it is in my mind. I think I can just kind of riff on it. So yeah, I got the lens and I opened the box up and I can leave my first impressions. I remember exactly what I thought right off the rip. This is what the lens looks like right here. Okay, and this is a 50mm f1.8 lens. If you look at the lens, it's all metal. It's constructed really, really well. It's got an aperture ring right here. It's got a manual focus, autofocus switch. And I'm going to talk about the build quality and just what I thought of it initially. Off the first glance, I thought this is a pretty big 51.8. I'll give you an example why I think that way. This is my Nikon FE2. This bad boy right here has a 51.8 on it, and look how small that is compared to this. Now, before anybody says anything, yes, I understand this isn't the same, but 51.8. My Canon AE1 is a similar thing. This is the 2.8, but the 51.8 is about the same size, pretty small. Okay, you might be thinking, but those are both are not autofocus lenses. Okay, what about the Nikon 50mm 1.8 D lens, this little guy right here? Yes, this is much smaller. You can get the Nikon 51.8 G lens. You can get a Canon 1.8 STM lens that they had, or the new one for the RF. Heck, I even think that these are smaller than the 51.8 Nikon Z and Nikon or Lumix S lenses. The 51.8 lens has been growing over time, and they're optically getting better, but they're getting bigger, and I think that loses some of the allure for the 51.8, the nifty 50, because part of the appeal, at least for me anyways, is the size element of it. So when I got this 7Artisans 51.8, my first impression was this is a pretty big lens. I like that it's made out of metal. I don't like the way how lenses are made out of plastic these days, although I know they're fine and they're premium enough, but I really like the metal construction. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of another 51.8. This is my Zeiss 55 1.8 for Sony. Look at the size difference here. It's almost, I would say, 30% bigger. This is an autofocus lens for a modern mount. This is a Zeiss lens. I like this lens a lot. It's very, very good. It almost has a similar build feel to the Zeiss. It's got the metal, it's smooth, all that stuff. But there are a few things right away off this 1.8 that you guys need to know. First of all, this aperture ring that they have on the lens right here, it is, let me put this lens down. It is pretty hard to turn. You can move it, but man, it takes a ton of resistance. And there's no click as you go through the aperture, and it doesn't lock into A for auto. There's an auto mode on this. Let me get my head out of the way so you guys can see this. There we go. Right? It has an A on it to go into auto, so you can, I think, use the dials or whatever it might be on your camera. And I thought that's pretty tough. The second thing is the same resistance is on this manual focus ring. It's really hard. If you compare that to the Zeiss lens here, this thing moves really nicely. It has a nice resistance to it, but it's not too hard to turn. This one, you almost feel like you're going to unlock it from the mount. And so my first impression of that wasn't very positive. The second thing, and this is driving me crazy, is this autofocus manual focus switch that's right here on the lens. I'm glad it has it. It works, but this is probably the worst implementation of this switch that I've had. And maybe mine's a bit, maybe not perfect. It works great, but it's so easy to just takes almost no resistance at all to move it from, I'm moving it right now with very little touch and pressure on this switch. And so I can't tell you how many times I've picked up the camera so far and it's been knocked into manual focus and you're trying to capture a quick shot and you're like, and you hit the switch back. And it almost like you can just, I mean, there's almost no resistance at all going from autofocus to manual focus. And I find this thing falling into manual focus quite a bit. So if I were to keep this lens on the camera, I would just tape it. I'd take some gaffer's tape and I would tape this thing in autofocus, and just leave it there for what it is. And so my first impressions of it were like, wow, this is a big lens. The rings are tough to turn, and the autofocus manual focus switch kind of sucks. I'm not so sure about this. But I stuck to shooting with it for a little bit. And I'm going to say I think that's kind of where it's a redeeming qualities, because this glass and this lens has a rendering that I really like. Let me show you some pictures so you guys understand what I'm talking about.
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Coming just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Tonight, we're gonna let it away. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna let it away.
Okay, so you had a chance to look at those pictures. What I'm finding is that this lens is sharp wide open. It has really nice, in my opinion, bokeh is a very subjective thing. I like the bokeh. And the other thing that's interesting is how it's got to be something to do with the coatings or maybe the lens elements. It renders highlights really, really nicely. It kind of has like this bloom effect to it. It looks really cool. And it just gives my images like I don't know, a less sterile look. And I like that. I actually like what I'm getting out of it, especially in black and white. I think this is a great black and white lens. The colors that come out of it, I think, are great. They almost changed the Nikon colors just a little bit, and I like the way that looks. So the images I've been getting out of this lens, I actually really like. So if you can get past some of the lens ring thing and the weird autofocus manual switch and the size, for $200 and something, the images coming out of it are I think, really good. There are a couple downfalls though. Again, back to the lens coatings or maybe the lens elements used. If you shoot directly into sun, you're going to get a lot of that like color fringing and some of the glowy stuff that happens. I'll put a couple pictures of that up right now. And the other thing is, if you try to shoot sun stars, I put this at f16, I think it is, or maybe it's f22, what it goes to. You can get sun stars, but again, back to the way it does the highlights, the sun was just this like super glowy ball, versus if I were to shoot that same picture on the Zeiss or maybe the modern Nikon 51.8 S lens for Z mount, it would not have that effect. And so it's something to do with that. And so you got to take this for what it is. It's a $200 lens. It's built really well from a construction standpoint, and it has a look to it that is different than even my Zeiss or, whoops, dropped my phone. Sorry about that, just dropped my phone. But it has a look that's different than my Zeiss. The Zeiss has a busier bokeh, it's sharp, different coatings, has a different look than the Nikon. The Nikon is a bit more sterile, but a very good lens. It just got a different look to it. And so if you're after that kind of a look, I think this might be a very interesting option to you. Again, I'm an aesthetics person, and so I like the metal build quality, but I really like and prefer, smaller lenses like this, or something they make on other camera systems. I guess with that being said, though, I've shot the Canon Nifty 50. I don't like that lens on the new RF system. And so I'm trying to think other small 50s that are out today that would compete with this. I would say, even the, what's a small 50mm lens that's out on a modern system right now? What, the Sony 51.8, that old lens? It's still a lot bigger than this. Panasonic's 51.8 is not a small lens. The Nikon 51.8 is not a small lens. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the lens I want doesn't really exist except on the Canon mount, and I don't really like that lens, unless you go adapt some old stuff or using f-mount still. So, with that being said, for $200, it's not a bad buy. Just be aware of some of these things. Again, I don't know if this is just my version with the switch that really. I'm literally going to put a piece of gaffer tape on this and just use it, but I am still going to shoot this because I really enjoy the images coming out of it, and we'll see how it goes. So yeah, that's it, guys. I appreciate you guys watching this video. Sometimes I like to do stuff like this as I'm trying to build the $1,000 kit, and I think I've got there. And I'm going to tell you what it is in the next video. I'm actually shooting at it right now. This whole video is shot on it. We'll see you next time. Appreciate you guys watching. Thanks.